Now, let's get started with this week's film reviews. First up, we have Thor, Love and Thunder. Now, here's a question. How the heck should I review a movie or film that I don't like? And more importantly, what is the purpose of reviews? Well, here are 3 purposes I can think of. Number 1, marketing, to sell the movie. Number 2, socializing, like, hey, did you see that new Thor movie? And 3, to learn, improving our own filmmaking skills. Well, I don't work for Disney. Disney actually works for me part-time, and I don't have any friends, so I'm going to focus on number 3, and here's how. As a filmmaker myself, I'm fascinated by analytical deconstructions. What can I learn by pulling a movie or film apart? Well, by doing that, I can isolate the elements. I can think about the writing, the directing, the cinematography, and the editing as separate things. And that gets me at least one level deeper than the circular opinion of, well, I didn't like it because it was bad, so I didn't like it because it was bad. What if you had an imaginary sort of mixing board and you could turn up and down the various faders that control the ingredients of a movie? For instance, you could take any movie and mix in more action, or you could turn down the knob that says romance, or maybe you could crank up the dialogue speed fader all the way so it turns into an Aaron Sorkin movie. Now, since we all have different tastes, wouldn't everyone's personal mix of the movie be totally different? Imagine if everyone had their own version of Blade Runner. Probably not too far in the future, we'll be able to actually do this with AI, and what a nightmare world that will be. Because if every movie were customized to maximize our own personal enjoyment, maybe at the very least we'd get bored. And maybe being exposed to someone else's very specific vision and challenging our own tastes is the point of films in the first place. But as purely an educational exercise, if I had that movie mixing board, what would be my own personal remix of Thor, Love and Thunder? Well, let's see. Now, first of all, I have to say that I love the sort of humor that goes too far, making the same unfunny joke so many times that you laugh yourself to death. Anti-humor, as it's called. Being intentionally not funny to where it somehow becomes funny. And Andy Kaufman did a lot of that. And I've seen Brendan Small do comedy sketches at The Tomorrow Show that go on for way too long, but that's what I was there for. However, I don't think that level of anti-humor was appropriate for a Thor movie. So if I could remix it, I would turn the anti-comedy fader down by about 25 or 50%, because the thing with the screaming goats, that actually got on Carl King's nerves. Now, if it were a Tim and Eric movie, fine, turn up those screaming goats even more. Make them scream nonstop for 3 hours. I would totally watch that and laugh the entire time. Overall, there was a looseness to the comedy. It felt almost experimental to see how far they could take it. And it definitely went to crazy town, as UCB would call it. And I would have pulled that element back for my own personal Thor movie tastes. I actually prefer the amount of comedy in the previous movie, Thor Ragnarok, which is my 17th favorite movie of all time. Folks. Now, I'm no master of comedy, but it seems like there should be more time spent on the setup part of the jokes and fewer punchlines, because this movie almost didn't get a break from all the punchlines. It's hard to break expectation and get a laugh when you don't establish the base reality. Whether or not you like or support the existence of Dave Chappelle, he is a master of getting very serious and then making you forget he's a comedian before breaking all of that tension with a punchline. And I would have done more of that if I were in charge of this movie. But that's just me. No one's giving Carl King $250 million to make a movie. I also want to talk about that opening scene with Christian Bale playing a dude named Gore, which rhymes with Thor. Anyway, that scene was right out of a classical tragedy. I was totally sucked in because this is the kind of heavy stuff that I want to see. There was barely any dialogue, it was slow, and they were suffering. It's like watching a Robert Eggers film. It's exactly my kind of thing. And then I started getting nervous. I was like, oh man, I hope the rest of the movie is like this. Please let it stay slow and heavy and dramatic. But nope, they tricked me again. After a disjointed heavy metal rendition of the Marvel theme music, it goes straight into a backstory montage narrated by a character named Korg, the voice of Taika Waititi himself. And it's a different movie than the one I was just watching. Like, what happened? The montage actually reminded me of one of those pitch meeting YouTube videos by Ryan George. And I wondered if Waititi was trying to beat Ryan to the punch by making fun of his own movie. It just felt very YouTube-y. And I don't remember what movie I recently talked about that also had that YouTube-like editing, but this is becoming a thing, so let's keep an eye out for that in the future. So that change in tone was disorienting to me, almost as if they had shot multiple movies and glued them together somehow. So that's another knob I would turn way down, that jumpy tonal juxtaposition knob. Is that a thing? Does the imaginary movie mixing board have one of those? After that, there's an action scene, and it very much looked like a video game, as in the cinematography didn't look realistic. And here's why I think that was. Well, aside from the fact that most of it was computer graphics, the shots could have used more depth. Specifically, it can help to put more objects into the extreme foreground. Instead, it was mostly middle ground and far background, which gives it a flat people in front of green screens look like the Star Wars prequels. So that's what Carl King would do. Push up that cinematography depth fader. And then we have another tonal non sequitur jump back to Natalie Portman's character and introducing her situation, which was more in line with the heavy drama of the opening scene. Well, good. Now we're back in serious film territory, right? So this movie does deal with serious dark topics, but it leaps to zany whoopee cushion slapstick stuff, and it stays there for a long time. Like, it really felt like two movies made by two different people. So I would stick with a more narrow tonal range. Maybe what our mixing board needs is a tonal range compressor. So I think that would be my biggest change to Thor Love and Thunder on the Carl King imaginary movie mixing board for my own personal monitor mix. But still, Taika Waititi is incredible, and I look forward to what he does next.